I've been a nurse for almost a decade, but I never worked the night shift alone before. This happened a week ago, and I can't shake it from my mind. The hospital is small and worn down. The lights flicker, and the hallways echo. As I started my shift, I felt both excitement and dread. I knew I had a heavy responsibility, and the emptiness around me only added to it. About 3 hours in, I heard faint tapping from an empty patient room. At first, I dismissed it. I was busy checking charts and adjusting 4 drips. But the tapping continued, and it started to get to me. Maybe it was just the wind or an old heater acting up. Still, my heart raced a little faster. I shook my head, trying to focus. That sound haunted me for the rest of the week. Shadows danced at the corners of my vision. I would glance over my shoulder and see nothing there. I felt eyes on me, like someone was watching from the corner of the room. And strange things happened. Supplies in the storage room would be out of place, a roll of gauze gone, gloves upside down. I told myself I was just tired and imagining things. At one point, I overheard 2 coworkers whispering in the break room about a patient who never existed. I crept closer, eager to hear more. They were joking around, but when I asked them later, they acted confused. They didn't know anything about it. I felt a knot in my stomach. Their dismissive tones made it worse. On my last shift, I was wheeling a cart of supplies down the hallway. Suddenly, I felt something cold brush against my arm. I froze. My heart pounded. The lights flickered again, and I spun around. Nothing was there. The air felt thick, like a heavy fog swirling around me. I could have sworn I heard soft murmuring, but it was too faint to make out. I wanted to leave. I wanted to go home and forget everything, but something held me there. I wanted to know what was lurking in the shadows, hiding from my eyes. I pushed onward, determined, but with each step, my heart raced more and more. As I reached the hallway's end, I turned around. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing just beside the door. It watched me. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, it was gone. The hallway felt even quieter, the silence pressing down on me. I could hardly breathe. I could still feel its gaze. Something was watching, waiting in those dim corners. I paced back to my station, feeling the cold air biting against my skin. I didn't know how to escape the hospital's grip. Every night since, the tapping has come back in dreams. The face of that shadow haunts my thoughts. I know deep down I'm not alone. I wish I could forget, but it feels like it's all just starting again. The following night, I was back for another shift. I took a deep breath before walking through the double sliding doors. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, but the familiar scent offered little comfort. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was entering a haunted house rather than a hospital. As I settled in, I tried distracting myself with paperwork. I hoped that keeping busy would calm my mind. The clock ticked away, each second stretching longer than the last. I forced myself to focus on the patient charts, but my eyes kept drifting to the empty rooms down the hall. Around midnight, I heard it again, the tapping. This time it felt closer, more deliberate. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. With shaky hands, I put down the chart and stood up. I had to confront whatever was making that sound. I walked towards the patient room it was coming from. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the wall. My heart raced. I reached for the door handle, but a part of me hesitated. What if something was inside? What if that something was deliberately trying to scare me? But curiosity won over fear, and I pushed the door open. The room sat empty, as I expected. I scanned every corner, but no one was there. The tapping had stopped. As I exhaled, unsure whether to feel relieved or disappointed, I noticed something on the floor near the bed. It was a small child's toy, a brightly colored figurine. I didn't recognize it as belonging to any of my patients. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. There was something unsettling about how out of place it seemed, especially in a hospital setting. What kind of child would have been here? I shivered, putting the toy into my pocket. Maybe it had been left by a family that once visited. Or maybe something else was left behind. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. I jumped, nearly dropping the toy. It sounded like metal clanging against the floor. My pulse quickened as I rushed out of the room to see what had happened. As I turned the corner, I spotted a cart toppled over. Medical supplies were scattered everywhere. My heart sank. I knelt to pick things up, hoping it was just an accident. But my breath caught in my throat when I noticed a paper at the edge of the cart. It was a handwritten note, and it made my stomach churn. "Help me," it read, written hastily like someone had scrawled it in a hurry. I stood up, looking around nervously. The hallway was empty again. Everything felt eerily quiet, as if the shadows were listening. The chilling sensation of being watched returned, heavier than before. I tucked the note into my scrubs and stepped back, feeling the weight of what I was carrying. I needed answers. But before I could process what to do next, the lights flickered again, throwing the hallway into darkness. Panic washed over me. I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, but I could barely see a thing as I glanced around. That's when I heard a soft whisper, muffled and barely audible. "It's not safe here." My breath hitched as I felt another cold breeze sweep past me, chilling me to the bone. I glanced over my shoulder, and something moved in the darkness behind me. I turned to face it, holding the light high. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence swallowed my words. I took a cautious step forward, but the whisper had vanished, leaving only the sound of my frayed breathing. I needed to uncover the truth behind this hospital, and fast. I could feel the shadows closing in on me. I moved deeper into the darkness, heart pounding. The flickering lights overhead buzzed, casting erratic shadows that danced on the walls. I could feel the air thicken around me, charged with tension. Steeling myself, I headed toward the nurse's station, thinking it might be a safer place to gather my thoughts. As I approached, I noticed something on the desk, a small, faded picture of a girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, with bright eyes and a wide smile. But something felt off. I had never seen this photo before, and it was strange to find it there, tucked away in a place that belonged to no one. I reached for it, but as soon as my fingers touched the frame, the power flickered again, and the image vanished into the shadows. Now I was unsettled. The note. The toy. The picture. What was happening here? My instinct screamed to leave, but my gut told me I had to dig deeper. I turned the corner toward the break room, thinking a few minutes to clear my head would help. As I entered, the air felt colder, the fluorescent light buzzing more aggressively. The sound of dripping water echoed from the far corner, where a sink sat half-filled. I leaned in closer to investigate, but my breath caught in my throat when I noticed a figure reflected in the glass window across from me. I spun around, pulse racing, but there was no one there, just empty chairs and tables looming ominously in the dim light. I wondered if I was losing it. The stress of the shift or maybe lack of sleep. But when I turned back to the sink, I noticed something glimmering inside. Hesitantly, I reached in and pulled out a small piece of metal, an old hospital bracelet. My heart raced again as I examined it. The name was barely legible, but it started with AL. Who was this person? Why was this here? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from down the hall, cutting through my thoughts like a knife. I bolted towards the noise, my heart drumming in my chest. The hall felt longer than before, shadows creeping and twisting. As I rounded the corner, I saw a door swinging open and closed on its own. I wanted to scream but found I couldn't voice any sound. Every instinct told me to run, yet I felt compelled to approach. The door continued its erratic dance like it was teasing me. Gathering what shaky courage I had left, I moved closer. That's when I saw it. On the floor just inside, a faded toy lay crumpled and dusty, right next to another note. My breath hitched again as I squinted to read the new message scrawled in the same desperate handwriting, "Don't let them take you." A heavy dread settled over me. I was no longer just a nurse in a hospital. I was a target. And I was running out of time. The shadows felt alive, and I instinctively turned to leave. But as I did, I felt the temperature drop, and icy fingers brushed against my arm. I turned slowly. The whispers returned, louder now. "Help us," they pleaded, layered over each other like a haunting chant. My panic peaked, and I bolted, sprinting back toward the exit, desperately searching for a way to escape this nightmare. I had to get answers, but it felt like the hospital was fighting back. I stumbled through the darkened hall, breathless and wide-eyed, driven by the urgent need to escape. My heart raced, still echoing with the whispers that clung to my mind. "Help us." The phrase repeated like a haunting warning as I made my way toward the nearest exit. But something stopped me. A soft glow flickered further down the corridor, barely perceptible at first. I hesitated, torn between escape and curiosity. I inched closer, drawn like a moth to that mysterious light. Maybe it held answers I desperately needed. As I approached the source, every step felt heavier, like the ground was trying to pull me down. I reached the doorway of a small room, one I rarely visited. The light was coming from an old computer, its screen casting an eerie glow in the stillness. I hesitated before stepping inside, barely able to suppress my racing thoughts. The desk was cluttered with papers, dusty and untouched for ages, but what caught my eye was the screen. It displayed a list of patients. Names scrolled in a steady stream, and then I saw it. The name starting with L from the bracelet. Lily Anderson. My stomach twisted. The name resonated like a bell in my mind. I clicked the mouse, and the screen shifted to Lily's profile. Underneath her name was a date, a haunting confirmation of death from several years ago. I felt sick. Why was this information here? What did it mean? My fingers trembled as I scanned the notes for any clue, but they were vague mentions of disappeared and unrest. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Another name was listed right beside hers, Laura Murphy. My own hands went clammy as I read through the notes. Discharged under strange conditions. Why had I never heard of these incidents? My breaths were growing short, each one punctuated by the encroaching unease. Suddenly, the computer shut off, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for a flashlight in my pocket. I flicked it on, truly aghast at the shadowy figures darting just beyond the edge of the beam, whispering desperately. It wasn't just the air that felt thickening, it was the very presence of something that wasn't supposed to be there. I sprinted back towards the hallway, my feet pounding against the floor. I needed to warn someone, anyone. As I burst back into the corridor, I suddenly froze. The door I had seen swinging earlier was now wide open, and a figure stood silhouetted against the darkness. It was unmistakable, a child, a girl with bright eyes that mirrored the girl in the photo. For a moment, fear turned to disbelief, and I forced myself to step forward. "Are you?" I never finished my question. The lights flickered back on, illuminating her face. An expression of terror washed over her, and she whispered urgently, "You have to leave." Before I could respond, she darted away down the hallway. My instinct was to follow, but a sudden wave of cold air swept through, knocking me back against the wall. Shadows erupted around me, swirling and closing in. "Help us!" The whispers grew louder, reverberating through the walls. My legs felt like jelly, and as I struggled to regain my footing, the girl vanished from my line of sight. I was left alone, trapped between the shadows and the knowledge that the hospital was hiding something dark. I had to understand the connection between Lily and Laura. I had to survive this night. But the dark was closing in, and I could feel whatever haunted this place pointing at me, desperate for something. I gritted my teeth and steeled my resolve. I was going to uncover the truth, whatever it took. Then everything went dark again. The darkness pressed in, a suffocating blanket wrapping around me. I felt an overwhelming urge to panic, but I fought against it. I needed to keep moving. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, feeling my pulse thump in my ears. I focused on the hallway ahead, where dim lights flickered, barely cutting through the gloom. As I stepped cautiously, I let the beam of my flashlight lead the way. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisted and distorted. How had I ended up here? Questions raced through my mind. Where did that girl go? What did she mean by leave? I pushed the thoughts aside and continued towards the first nurse's station. I hoped someone might still be there, but the area felt deserted. I called out, "Hello." My voice sounded small against the stark silence. No answer. I turned back to the flickering lights, which seemed to beckon me. I refused to succumb to fear. I refused to believe I was completely alone. I walked past the station, heading towards the break room, hoping there might still be a coffee pot or someone working late. When I entered, I was hit by a rush of cold air again. A chill crept down my spine, and I instinctively looked around. The dim light overhead buzzed like 100 angry bees. My flashlight flickered ominously, and I cursed under my breath. That S when I saw it, a piece of paper on the table, illuminated enough in the faint light. I walked over and picked it up. It was a hastily scribbled note, filled with a jumble of words. The past is not dead. They are watching. Find the truth. Before it finds you. My fingers trembled as a sense of dread pooled in my stomach. The words echoed in my mind, each one weighty with implications. How could I find the truth? Who were they? Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hospital, making me jump as I dropped the note. It sounded like metal against metal from down the hall. My instincts screamed at me to run, to escape this nightmare. But I found myself drawn forward, burying my fear deep inside. I followed the sound, cautiously moving through the shadows, unsure of what awaited me. Each step made my heart pound harder. I reached the source of the noise, a storage room with the door ajar, swinging slightly as if inviting me in. Taking a steadying breath, I nudged the door open with the tip of my shoe. The room was cluttered, boxes stacked high, but the noise was gone. My eyes locked onto an old metal cabinet in the corner, half open. Pushing a nearby box aside, I approached it. Halfway to the cabinet, I heard a soft rustle behind me and spun around, ready to confront whatever shadow lay in wait. But nothing. Just silence. I focused back on the cabinet and pulled the door fully open, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, a stack of manila files caught my attention. I pulled one out and flipped it open. The first name I saw sent a jolt through me. Lily Anderson. I couldn't believe it. I glanced around, the oppressive gloom feeling heavier as the shadows seemed to swirl closer. That S when I heard her voice again, faint but clear, "You have to leave." Panic surged as the world around me flickered and darkened once more. The cabinet door slammed shut, leaving me in total blackness. "Please," I murmured to the empty room, "I need to understand." But the only response was the echo of my own words. I blinked, trying to get my bearings in the darkness. The sensation of cold metal pressed against my palm reminded me that I was still in the storage room. I felt around, searching for anything I could use as a guide. My breath came quick, fogging up in the chilly air. I took a small step back, trying to remember the layout of the room. The cabinets, the boxes, they seemed to shift in the gloom. Gritting my teeth, I prepared to move towards the door when I heard it again, a soft rustle, almost like whispers intertwining. Panic clawed at my throat. "Hello." I called out, my voice tremulous. Nothing answered me. Giving in to my growing dread, I edged towards the door. In the heavy silence, my feet shuffled awkwardly against the floor. The faintest whisper brushed against my ears, a shuddering sigh that felt so close, yet I saw no one. I pushed the door open, and a sliver of light flooded my vision. I stumbled through, gasping slightly as my flashlight flickered back to life. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing the disheveled hallway outside. With every step, a gnawing fear gripped my insides. I needed to find more answers about Lily and the cryptic warnings. Her name haunted me. I progressed towards the nurse's station, passing shadowy figures of medical equipment, machinery, and scattered chairs. That's when I noticed something out of place on the counter, a small white envelope, bathed in the pale light. I approached it warily. It was sealed, but curiosity forced my hand to pry it open. Inside was a photograph, blurry at first glance, but I could make out the image of a girl, maybe 12 or 13, with striking blue eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. I flipped it over, and there was a date scrawled on the back, March 15, 2008. I froze. This date seemed significant somehow, but I couldn't pull the memory from the back of my mind. Then I heard it again, a sharp, urgent knock from the break room. The sound echoed and broke through the haze of my thoughts. I hesitated, torn between investigating the mystery of the photo and the unsettling pounding that demanded my attention. I looked back at the photograph, resisting the urge to shove it in my pocket. Instead, I placed it back in the envelope. I didn't want to inadvertently disturb whatever dark past it connected to. The knocking repeated, more persistent now, accompanied by a strange low hum that resonated through the walls. Without thinking, I made my way towards the break room again, guided solely by instinct. My heart raced with each step. As I neared the door, the humming intensified, filling the air with a dissonant melody that prickled down my spine. I hesitated at the threshold, the urge to turn back gnawing at me, but something compelled me forward. I opened the door just enough to peek in. The sight stopped me cold. The break room was illuminated by the flickering overhead lights, casting long shadows throughout the space. A figure stood in front of the coffee machine, its back towards me. "Who is there?" I croaked, my voice hoarse. The figure turned, and my stomach dropped at the sight of deep-set eyes, hollow and sunken. An almost familiar face stared back. "Lily?" I whispered, the name slipping from my lips before I could stop it. But the figure melted into shadows before my eyes, vanishing into thin air. The humming stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. My breath caught in my throat, and I took a step back, instinctively glancing over my shoulder. The break room felt impossibly small, the air thick with a sense of dread. I was alone, yet it felt as if the very walls were closing in around me. The coffee machine dripped slowly in the background, each drop striking my ears like a countdown. I had to leave, had to find some light in this suffocating darkness. Maybe I imagined Lily, but the chill of her presence lingered, wrapping around me like a creeping fog. I turned to leave when something on the ground caught my attention. There was a small, crumpled paper peeking out from beneath a table. My heart raced as I bent down to retrieve it. The paper felt damp and worn. I opened it carefully, revealing a list of names. My fingers trembled as I read through the hastily scribbled entries, patients, each one followed by a date. One name stood out. Lily Park. The date next to it matched the one on the photograph. My pulse quickened. I remembered hearing that name in passing conversations, but it was buried under layers of fear and confusion. Why was she here? Then I heard a rattling noise from the far corner of the break room. My head snapped in that direction. I squinted through the dim light, willing my eyes to adjust. I could barely make out a shadow now flitting between the cabinets. The humming returned, a subtle vibration that pulsed directly through the floor. I swallowed hard. "Is someone there?" I called out, feeling rather foolish as my voice echoed back at me. Silence answered. Despite every instinct screaming at me to run, I stepped toward the cabinet. My flashlight beam cut through the shadows, illuminating the space. Nothing was there. Just dusty mugs and stacks of forgotten papers. I was alone, or at least I wanted to believe that. Something rustled again, and I wasn't alone anymore. A low moan, almost a whisper, curled around my mind. It seemed to resonate from the very air surrounding me. It was sorrowful yet sinister, and I felt drawn toward it. Before I could think better of it, I moved deftly to the source of the unsettling sound. In the shadowy corner stood a figure, an outline that seemed less like a solid body and more like a distortion in the air. I blinked, trying to comprehend what I saw. Lily? I breathed out again, fearing the answer but desperately hoping for one. The figure turned slowly, and though the light barely illuminated its features, I recognized those deep-set, sunken eyes. This was not a figment of my imagination. I stumbled back, trying to orient myself, grasping the edge of the table for balance. "Please, don't," I began, feeling a cold wave enshroud me. In response, there was a sharp intake of breath, a noise that felt like it was echoing from a deep void of despair. I barely mustered the courage to hold my ground. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving me alone once more. The sound had stopped, and the only thing left was the stale air that clung to my skin. My thoughts raced. What did this mean? I now had proof of something haunting this place, something tied to Lily. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. As I turned to leave the break room, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye halted me. I looked back just in time to see a piece of paper flutter down from the air, landing softly on the floor. I bent to pick it up, and everything went dark. I jolted awake, my heart pounding. The break room was dark, the only sound the rhythmic thud of my own pulse. I blinked rapidly, trying to shake off the disorientation. What had just happened? The crumpled piece of paper lay on the floor beside me, an unassuming reminder of my last moments before the void. As I reached down to retrieve it, a chill cut through the air. Goosebumps broke out on my arms. The darkness felt different now, more oppressive. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but it felt charged, as if something was watching. I took a deep breath. I needed to get out. This was ridiculous. Yet I found myself scanning the dimly lit room, searching for any sign of Lily or whatever I had seen. I couldn't resist the urge to look at the paper first. My fingers traced over the familiar list of names, and my breath caught again when I noticed something odd. There was a new name at the bottom. Daniel Chase. I didn't recognize it, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Why wasn't this name on the previous list I had found? Who was he, and why was his name here? Just then, the coffee machine sputtered to life, startling me. I hadn't even turned it on, and I hesitated before stepping closer. The smell of old coffee filled the air, mixing with the unsettling remnants of whatever lingering presence had haunted me moments before. My stomach twisted. Did it mean someone else was in the room or had been here before me? In a fit of resolve, I slapped my palms against the cool table and pushed myself up. I needed to check outside the break room, needed confirmation I was truly alone. I stepped through the door, my flashlight flickering uncertainly in the gloom. The hallway felt endless as I crept along, each step echoing in the silence. The hospital was always eerie at night, but it felt even more wrong tonight. As I rounded a corner, I thought I heard faint laughter, like a whisper carried by the wind. My breath caught again, fear gnawing at my gut. I paused, straining to listen, but the sounds faded. Instead, I was met with a wall of silence, heavier than before. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky and unsure. I half expected to hear someone respond, or maybe even see Lily step from the shadows. Nothing. Just as I turned to keep walking, I saw another figure slip past the far exit. The silhouette was vague, moving too quickly to be recognized. No, it couldn't be. I cursed under my breath, my gut twisting into knots. "Daniel?" I whispered, testing the name I had just learned. No answer. My instincts screamed for me to run, but my body locked in place. I had to know who these people were. I took a step forward, my heart thumping louder than the footsteps that were now echoing off the walls. Then, just as I was about to call out again, the fluorescent lights above flickered violently before plunging the hallway into darkness. My breath quickened, and I felt a surge of panic. Is this how the story ends? I had to find out what it all meant, had to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows. I groped blindly for my flashlight, but just as I found it, the eerie laughter returned, filling the air around me. I stumbled back, shaking. Then everything went quiet, an unsettling calm wrapping around me like a shroud. I stood there, frozen in the suffocating silence. My heart raced like a drum, pounding in my ears. The flashlight flickered weakly in my grasp. I pressed the button harder, desperate for light. I felt like a child lost in the dark. Just when I thought the darkness couldn't get worse, the laughter returned, echoing through the empty hall. "Who is there?" I called, but the words felt weak and small. There was no response, and doubt crept in. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. I had been alone too long. I couldn't let fear pull me back into the void. In a shaky motion, I turned on the flashlight. A beam of light broke through the darkness, casting a narrow path ahead. My hands trembled as I took a step forward. The light flickered again, making shadows dance against the pale walls. I wasn't alone. My gut told me that. I moved carefully, keeping my senses alert. Each step felt heavy, and I was hyper-aware of every creak in the floor beneath my feet. I didn't want to see anything yet. At the same time, I craved answers. Who was Daniel Chase? Why did his name appear on that list? As I walked down the corridor, I noticed a door ajar at the end, the faintest sliver of light spilling out like a beacon. It drew me in against my better judgment. I stepped closer and could feel the air shift around me, thickening with tension. The faint laughter faded into a haunting silence just as I reached for the doorknob. My heart raced, and I hesitated. But what else could I do? I had to reach the truth. I yanked the door open. Inside was a small office stuffed with files and old medical equipment, things left behind from years ago, perhaps. My eyes darted around, scanning for anything out of place. That's when I saw a framed photograph on the desk. I stepped forward, my curiosity breaking through my fear. It showed a group of hospital staff, all smiles, posing in front of the building. The year was scratched out in red ink. But what caught my attention was one face among the group. It was Lily, her cheerful expression frozen in time. Just beneath her, in small letters, was a name I recognized, Daniel Chase. A cold knot twisted in my stomach. This wasn't just a coincidence. I skimmed the rest of the desk, but nothing else made sense. Suddenly, the laughter returned, now sharper, mocking. Without thinking, I spun around, my flashlight illuminating the room. "Show yourself!" I shouted, but there was no response. The laughter faded, replaced by a steady, soft whisper, "Help us." It sent a jolt through my chest. The words were chilling, like fingernails on glass. But who was asking for help? I realized my breathing had quickened again as I backed away, instinctively searching for the exit. Then I felt a cold presence at my back, as if someone or something was waiting for me to turn around. I was trapped, alone in the dark with the soft, echoing cries of lost souls. At that moment, the lights flickered back to life, flooding the room with brightness. But I was not ready for what I saw. My eyes widened, and a primal fear coursed through me. The room was no longer empty. Shapes emerged at the edge of the light, faces twisted in confusion and despair, staring at me with pleading eyes. I stumbled backward, unable to look away. Who were they? And what did they want? The tension in the air thickened, and I realized I had plunged deeper into a darkness I never understood. Without thinking, I turned and fled, racing down the hall, the laughter still echoing in my ears. I needed to find help. But as I sprinted away, a chilling thought sank in, maybe I was already too late. I burst through the emergency exit, gasping for air as the cool night breeze hit my face. The hospital's fluorescent lights faded into the background, and the cacophony of whispers was drowned out by the thumping of my heart. I had escaped, but what had I truly left behind? The parking lot was empty, a desolate expanse of concrete dotted with abandoned cars. I couldn't remember how I got there, how long I'd been in that hospital. It felt like hours, yet time stretched in that eerie place, my reality and the supernatural curling like smoke around each other. Taking a deep breath, I fished my keys out of my pocket, my fingers trembling. But before I reached my car, a chill tingled up my spine. That familiar sensation of being watched radiated through me. I glanced back toward the hospital's shadowy silhouette, lit faintly by moonlight. Silence blanketed the area, but a whisper danced on the wind, calling out, pleading, help us. I froze, guilt and fear pinching my chest like a vice. Those faces I saw, who were they? There had to be something connecting them all, yet I felt an inexplicable weight to uncover it, an itch I couldn't rub away. Could I really walk away knowing I had witnessed something so wrong? The overwhelming dread pulled me toward the door I had just escaped, but the courage I had mustered began to wane. I stood there, torn between leaving that nightmarish place forever behind and the haunting thought that if I turned away, something sinister would follow me. I finally decided to flee. I shoved my keys back into my pocket and hastily made my way to my car, adrenaline powering my steps. The engine roared to life as I turned the key, and I pulled out of the lot, vowing to find a safe place. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not truly leaving. I might have escaped the hospital, but the shadows stayed behind, clinging to my thoughts. Days passed, and I tried to make sense of everything. I returned to my everyday life, but the tapping in my dreams became a nightly ritual. I couldn't shake the weight of the memories of faces that drifted before my eyes, piercing my consciousness. You have to leave. Help us. Even at the clinic, I sensed the shadows lurking in the corners. Co-workers sometimes glanced at me with pity in their eyes, but I brushed it off. I knew they wouldn't understand. The whispers intertwined with every patient interaction, and I questioned myself more than ever. I searched for answers online, any files about past patients, incidents, that seemed lost to time. I found records seemingly erased, missing reports or deleted names. That's when I stumbled upon a name I hadn't expected: Laura Murphy. I felt a wave of recognition wash over me just as my laptop screen flickered. I had to dig deeper, but the truth started to feel like it was unearthing itself in pieces, and each discovery led to more questions. Late at night, drawn to the dim glow of my computer, I sought connections, hidden stories buried beneath layers of medical jargon. Hours passed before exhaustion pulled me from my screen, and I swore I could feel the weight of those forgotten souls pressing against me, as if trying to share a truth hidden from me. I moved across town after that, hoping the new surroundings would help, but I still thought of that hospital. I had never revisited, and a part of me feared I would if I didn't confront it. The images of the faces haunted my nights, and the childish laughter echoed just beneath the surface. I could still sense those shadows lurking in the recesses of my memory. But in the stillness of the night, I didn't know if they were waiting for me or if they were merely remnants of my psyche tinged with that unexplainable darkness. As I sat in another dimly lit room, looking out the window at the stars, I realized I had lived a life of necessity, understanding not all truths were meant to be uncovered. Shadows remained in the corners of every hospital, every line of duty. Sometimes I still think about it, the past always nipping at my heels. And I wonder what happened to Lily, to Laura, to the children. Lost in that dark place. I never found definitive answers, but maybe it was a truth meant to linger, an acknowledgement of the mystery woven into the fabric of life and death.